The rain hit the windshield like fists, each drop exploding against the glass with a violence that matched the storm inside my chest. I'd been walking for hours, my designer heels long abandoned somewhere on the highway, my bare feet bleeding against the asphalt that still held the day's heat beneath the cold deluge. The silk blouse that had cost more than most people's monthly salary clung to my skin, transparent and useless, offering no protection from the elements or from the truth I was running from. I didn't know where I was going. That was the point. Anywhere but back to the marble palace, where my husband's empire was built, on decisions that turned my stomach. Where the man I'd married had become someone I no longer recognized. Where loving him meant accepting that innocent blood had been spilled because of choices he'd made without consulting the woman who shared his name and his bed. The headlights appeared behind me like searching eyes, and my first instinct was to run. Dante's men. They had to be. He would never let me simply disappear, not when I carried the Marchetti name, not when my absence could be interpreted as weakness in the carefully constructed facade of his power. But my legs wouldn't carry me any further. 6 hours of walking in the rain had stripped away everything, except the raw truth. I had nowhere to go. The truck slowed beside me. An old Ford that had seen better decades, its paint job more rust than blue. The window rolled down with a mechanical whine, revealing a man whose face held the kind of exhaustion I recognized because I saw it in my own mirror every morning before the makeup went on. Dark hair dampened by rain, stubble that spoke of too many early mornings and late nights, eyes that assessed me with concern rather than recognition. "Ma'am, are you okay?" His voice was rough but gentle, the kind of voice that asked questions because it genuinely cared about the answers. Not the calculated gentleness of men in Dante's world, where every word was a chess move and every kindness had a price. I opened my mouth to lie, to manufacture some story that would send him away and leave me to whatever fate the night had planned. Instead, what came out was the truth. No. The single word seemed to unlock something in him. He pushed open the passenger door from the inside, and I saw the interior of the truck, worn seats patched with duct tape, a child's backpack in the footwell, empty coffee cups in the holder that spoke of someone working multiple shifts to keep the lights on. This wasn't one of Dante's men. This was someone from the world I'd left behind when I'd married into the Marchetti family, the world where people struggled and survived and helped strangers, because that's what decent people did. "Get in," he said, and it wasn't a command, but an offer. "Whatever you're running from, you'll catch pneumonia out here before you get away from it." I climbed into the truck, my soaked clothes immediately creating a puddle on his floor. He didn't comment on it, just cranked the heat and pulled back onto the road. The warmth felt like an assault after hours in the cold, making my skin prickle and my teeth chatter even harder. "I'm Ethan," he said, not asking for my name in return. "I live about 15 minutes from here. Got a spare room, some dry clothes that might fit you, and a daughter who'll sleep through anything. So you don't have to worry about explaining yourself tonight if you don't want to." The casual way he offered shelter to a stranger, the absence of questions or demands, made my throat tight with emotions I'd been holding back since I'd walked out of my gilded cage. In Dante's world, everything had a price. Kindness was leverage. Safety was conditional. This man was offering both without asking what I could give him in return. "Valentina," I heard myself say. Just my first name. Not Marchetti. Not the identity that would change the way he looked at me, that would transform his kindness into fear, or calculation, or greed. "Nice to meet you, Valentina," Ethan replied, his eyes never leaving the rain-slicked road, though I wish it was under better circumstances. The house he pulled up to was small, a 2-story structure with peeling paint and a porch that sagged slightly on one side. The yard was neat despite its simplicity, toys arranged carefully near the door, a garden that had been tended with more love than money. It was the opposite of everything I'd known for the past 3 years, and something in my chest loosened at the sight of it. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and laundry detergent, the lived-in scent of a real home, rather than the sterile perfection of the mansion I'd fled. Ethan handed me a stack of clothes, sweatpants and a hoodie that would swallow me whole, and pointed to the bathroom down the hall. "Take your time," he said. "I'll make some tea, or coffee, if you prefer." In the bathroom, I peeled off my ruined clothes and stood under the shower until the water ran clear instead of pink with the blood from my cut feet. The mirror showed me a stranger. Hair plastered to my skull, mascara tracked down my cheeks, lips blue from the cold. I looked nothing like Valentina Marchetti, wife of the most feared man on the East Coast. I looked like what I was, a woman who had run until she couldn't run anymore. When I emerged wearing Ethan's oversized clothes and with my hair wrapped in a towel, I found him in the kitchen stirring something on the stove. The steam rising from the pot smelled like chicken and vegetables, simple and nourishing. "Lucy's asleep," he said, nodding toward the stairs. "My daughter. She's 7. Sleeps like the dead, thankfully. Or she'd be down here asking you 100 questions about why you're wearing my clothes." The mention of his daughter made me realize the risk he was taking, letting a stranger into the home he shared with his child. He knew nothing about me, about what I might be running from or who might be looking for me. Yet here he was, setting a bowl of soup in front of me with hands that bore the calluses of hard work. "You don't know me," I said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of what he was offering. "I could be dangerous." Ethan sat down across from me with his own bowl, his expression thoughtful. "Could be," he acknowledged. "But I don't think you are. I think you're someone who needed help, and I was in a position to give it. That's all this needs to be." I ate the soup slowly, each spoonful warming me from the inside out. We didn't talk much. He asked if I was warm enough, if I needed anything else, if the guest room would be acceptable. He didn't ask where I'd come from, or why I'd been walking alone in the rain. He didn't push for the story I wasn't ready to tell. When I finally made my way to the guest room, I found fresh sheets on the bed and an extra blanket folded at the foot. The window looked out over the quiet street, so different from the armed guards and security cameras that surrounded my marital home. Here, the only sounds were the rain against the glass and the distant rumble of thunder. I lay in the dark, my body exhausted, but my mind still racing. Somewhere out there, Dante was looking for me. His entire organization would be mobilized, searching every friend's house, every hotel, every place I might run to. But they wouldn't think to look here, in this modest home in a working-class neighborhood, with a single father who barely made ends meet, and a daughter who slept peacefully upstairs. For the first time in 3 years, I felt safe. Not protected by guards or gates, or the fear my husband's name inspired, but genuinely safe in the care of someone who asked for nothing in return. I didn't know then that by morning, 5 SUVs would surround this house. That Dante would appear at the door with rain in his hair and desperation in his eyes. That the simple kindness of a stranger would become the catalyst for everything that followed. All I knew, as sleep finally claimed me, was that I had found shelter in the storm. And for one night, that was enough. I woke to the sound of small feet padding past my door and the smell of coffee brewing somewhere below. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. The room was too small, the ceiling too low, the morning light filtering through curtains that weren't the custom silk drapes of my bedroom at the estate. Then it all came rushing back. The rain, the highway, Ethan's truck, the soup that had tasted like salvation. I sat up slowly, my body aching from yesterday's ordeal. My feet throbbed where the asphalt had torn the skin, and my muscles protested every movement. But I was dry, I was warm, and I was free. At least for now. The clothes Ethan had lent me still hung loose on my frame, and I caught my reflection in the small mirror above the dresser. Without makeup, without the armor of designer labels and professional styling, I looked younger, vulnerable, like the girl I'd been before Dante Marchetti had walked into my life at a charity gala and made me believe in fairy tales that turned out to be nightmares. Voices drifted up from downstairs. Ethan's low rumble and a higher, curious voice that must belong to Lucy. I should leave before the child saw me, before I complicated their simple morning routine with my presence. But my feet wouldn't move. Where would I go? I had no money, no phone, no plan beyond putting distance between myself and the man I'd married. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Valentina?" Ethan's voice was gentle, respectful of the barrier between us. "Lucy's asking if our guest wants breakfast. No pressure, but there are pancakes if you're hungry." Pancakes. Such an ordinary thing, such a normal morning ritual. In my world, Dante's world, breakfast was prepared by staff and served on china that cost more than Ethan's truck. But I couldn't remember the last time someone had actually cooked for me, had offered food as comfort rather than performance. "I'll be down in a minute," I called back, my voice still rough from crying and cold. When I descended the stairs, I found a scene of domestic chaos that made my chest tight. Ethan stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with the ease of long practice, while a small girl with dark curls and her father's eyes sat at the table, swinging her legs and chattering about something that had happened at school. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me, her eyes going wide. "You're pretty," she announced with the blunt honesty of childhood. "Are you a princess?" Ethan turned, spatula in hand, an apology already forming on his lips. But I found myself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced curve I'd perfected for charity events and family photographs. "Not a princess," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "Just someone who got caught in the rain." Lucy nodded as if this explanation made perfect sense. "Daddy says you're staying in the guest room. We don't usually have guests, except for Mrs. Chen next door, but she doesn't count because she's basically family." "Lucy," Ethan warned gently, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me. "Let Valentina eat in peace." But I didn't mind the child's questions. They were innocent, uncomplicated, so different from the careful interrogations I'd endured in Dante's world, where every conversation was a negotiation, and every answer was weighed for weakness. We ate together, the three of us, and I learned that Ethan worked construction during the day and drove for a rideshare service at night, that Lucy wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, that they'd lived in this house for 2 years, ever since Lucy's mother had left them for a life that didn't include the complications of a struggling single father and his daughter. The pain in Ethan's voice when he mentioned his ex-wife was subtle but unmistakable. He understood abandonment. He knew what it felt like to be left behind by someone who was supposed to stay. Maybe that's why he'd stopped for me on the highway, because he recognized the look of someone running from something they couldn't bear to face. After breakfast, Lucy bounded upstairs to get ready for school, and Ethan started clearing the dishes. I moved to help him, our movements settling into an easy rhythm that felt strange and natural all at once. "You don't have to tell me," Ethan said quietly, his hands submerged in soapy water. "Whatever you're running from, whatever happened, it's your business. But if there's someone I should be worried about, someone who might come looking for you here, I need to know. Not for me, but for Lucy." The question was fair, more than fair. I'd brought myself into his home, into his daughter's life, without considering the danger I might be dragging behind me. Dante wouldn't hurt a child. I had to believe that, had to cling to the memory of the man who'd once been capable of tenderness. But his men, the people he did business with, the enemies he'd made, they didn't operate with the same constraints. "My husband," I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "He's looking for me. I left him 3 days ago, and he won't stop until he finds me." Ethan's hands stilled in the water. "Is he dangerous? To you, I mean." I thought about Dante's hands, which had held me so gently on our wedding night, and had ordered deaths with the same casual ease most people ordered coffee. Not to me, not physically. But he's dangerous to anyone who gets between him and what he wants. And what does he want? Me, back in the cage he built and called a home. Ethan dried his hands on a towel, his expression thoughtful. "Why did you leave?" The question I'd been avoiding, even in my own head. The truth I'd been running from as much as I'd been running from Dante himself. I took a breath and let the words come. "He killed someone," I said quietly. Or had someone killed. The distinction doesn't matter. A man who worked in one of his clubs. Someone who'd seen something he shouldn't have and made the mistake of talking about it. The man had a family, a wife, 2 kids. And Dante decided his life was worth less than protecting a secret. The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of all they implied. Ethan didn't react with shock or judgment, just a slow nod that suggested he'd suspected something like this. When I confronted him about it, I continued. He told me I didn't understand the business, that sometimes hard decisions had to be made, that this was the life I'd signed up for when I married him. I laughed, a sound without humor. But I didn't sign up for this. I fell in love with a man who seemed powerful and protective, and I woke up married to a monster who thinks love means owning someone completely. Ethan leaned against the counter, his arms crossed over his chest. What was the final straw? The thing that made you leave? I closed my eyes, seeing again the news report I'd watched from my private sitting room. The victim's widow, her face blurred for protection, describing her husband as a good man who'd made one mistake. The children, too young to understand why their father wasn't coming home. The casual cruelty of erasing a life because it had become inconvenient. I realized I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore, I said. Couldn't pretend I didn't know what he was capable of. Couldn't keep accepting the jewelry and the clothes and the lifestyle that was built on other people's suffering. So I took nothing but what I was wearing and I walked out. That takes courage, Ethan said simply. I shook my head. It was cowardice. Real courage would have been standing up to him years ago, the first time I suspected what he really did for a living. Real courage would have been refusing to marry him when I saw the red flags I chose to ignore. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? I met his eyes. I accepted 3 years of luxury while turning a blind eye to where it came from. I'm complicit in everything he did during that time. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then said, You can't change the past, but you can choose what you do now. You chose to leave. That's something. Upstairs, Lucy called out that she was ready for school. Ethan glanced at the clock and grimaced. I need to drop her off and get to the job site. Will you be okay here for a few hours? The thought of being alone in the house, waiting, not knowing if Dante's men would appear at any moment, made my stomach clench. But I nodded. I'll be fine. He hesitated, then grabbed a notepad from the counter and scribbled something on it. This is my number. If anything happens, if anyone comes by or if you just get scared, call me. I'll come back. I took the paper, his handwriting simple and direct, like everything else about him. Thank you for all of this. Don't thank me yet, he said with a slight smile. Lucy's going to have about 1 million questions when she gets home from school. After they left, the house felt too quiet. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, examining the life Ethan had built here. Photographs on the walls showed Lucy at various ages, always smiling, always held by her father in images that captured genuine love rather than staged perfection. There were bills stacked on the kitchen counter, the kind of everyday financial struggle I'd forgotten existed. A calendar with Lucy's school events marked in careful handwriting. This was what normal looked like. What real looked like. Not the performance I'd been living for 3 years. I was standing at the window, watching the quiet street when I saw it. A black sedan, windows tinted, moving too slowly past the house. My heart stopped. They'd found me already. Dante's reach extended further than I'd imagined, his network more comprehensive than I'd feared. The car passed without stopping, but the damage was done. My brief illusion of safety shattered like glass. It was only a matter of time before they came back, before they confirmed I was here, before the full weight of Dante's organization descended on this modest house and the kind man who'd made the mistake of helping me. I should leave now, before Lucy came home from school, before Ethan returned from work. Disappear again and lead them away from this place, from these people who deserved better than to be caught in the crossfire of my failed marriage. But where would I go? I had no resources, no allies, no plan, and some small, desperate part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have one more night of feeling human before the inevitable happened. I was still standing at the window when my phone, which I'd left behind at the estate, wasn't in my pocket. But I could feel its absence like a phantom limb, could imagine it lighting up with Dante's calls, his messages alternating between fury and pleading, the way they always did when he thought he was losing control. By the time Ethan returned that afternoon, I'd made my decision. I would tell him everything, not just about Dante, but about who Dante was, about the Marchetti family and what the name meant in certain circles, about the danger I'd brought to his doorstep simply by accepting his kindness. And then I would leave, before the morning came and brought with it the consequences I knew were coming. I just didn't know that by dawn, it would already be too late. Lucy came home from school bubbling with stories about her day, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she raced through the door. She stopped when she saw me curled up on the couch with a book I'd found on Ethan's shelf, her face brightening with the kind of uncomplicated joy I'd forgotten existed. "You're still here," she exclaimed, as if my presence was a gift rather than an imposition. "Daddy said you might be gone when I got back." I glanced at Ethan, who stood in the doorway with an apologetic expression. "I told her our guest might have places to be," he explained. "I'm still here," I confirmed, closing the book. "For a little while longer, at least." Lucy dropped her backpack and climbed onto the couch beside me, her small body radiating warmth and energy. "Do you have kids?" she asked with characteristic bluntness. The question hit harder than I expected. Dante and I had talked about children, in the abstract way people discuss futures they assume will unfold naturally. But I'd quietly taken precautions, unwilling to bring a child into a world where their father's business involved the kind of decisions that had finally driven me away. "No," I said simply. "No kids." "Do you want some?" "Lucy," Ethan intervened gently. "That's a pretty personal question." But I found myself answering anyway. "I used to think I did. Now I'm not sure I'd be a good mother." Lucy considered this with the seriousness of a child unused to adult self-doubt. "I think you'd be good at it," she announced. "You're nice, and you smell pretty, and you didn't get mad when I asked nosy questions." Despite everything, I laughed. Those are important qualifications. While Ethan prepared dinner, pasta with sauce from a jar, apologizing for its simplicity, Lucy showed me her homework and told me about the boy in her class who'd pulled her hair and the teacher who'd praised her science project. I helped her with math problems, falling easily into the rhythm of explaining concepts in ways a 7-year-old could grasp. This was what I'd given up when I'd married Dante. Not the wealth or status, but this, the ordinary magic of everyday life, the small connections that made existence meaningful rather than merely luxurious. I'd traded authenticity for opulence and called it love. Over dinner, I watched Ethan with his daughter, the easy affection between them, the way he listened to her rambling stories with genuine interest rather than distracted tolerance. This was what a real parent looked like. What real love looked like. Not the possessive intensity Dante had called devotion, but this quiet, steady presence that asked nothing except to be allowed to care. "I need to talk to you," I said to Ethan after Lucy had been sent upstairs to get ready for bed. "About who I really am. About what you've gotten yourself into by helping me." He settled into the chair across from me, his expression patient. "I'm listening." I took a breath and spoke the name I'd been avoiding. "My husband is Dante Marchetti." I watched for recognition, for the fear or greed or calculation that name usually inspired. For a moment, Ethan's face remained blank. Then understanding dawned, followed by something that looked like concern rather than terror. "The Marchetti family," he said slowly. "The ones in the news last year when that prosecutor disappeared before he could testify?" "The same." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, processing. "So when you said your husband was dangerous, I meant he controls half the illegal operations on the East Coast, that he has politicians and police on his payroll, that people who cross him tend to end up in the Hudson River." I forced myself to meet his eyes. I didn't know what he was when I married him. I was 21, working at a gallery, and he was charming and generous, and made me feel like I was the center of his universe. By the time I understood what the family business really was, I was already in too deep. "Why did you stay?" Ethan asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. I'd asked myself that question 1,000 times. Fear, at first, then guilt. He'd never hurt me, and part of me felt obligated to stand by him despite what he did. And honestly, part of me enjoyed the power. Being Valentina Marchetti meant people treated me with respect, meant I never had to worry about money or safety or whether I mattered. It was seductive, even knowing what it cost. What changed? I watched a news report about the man he'd killed, saw his children's faces, and I realized I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who could justify anything as long as it didn't directly affect her. Ethan was quiet, his expression thoughtful. Finally, he said, "You should know that staying here puts you at risk, puts Lucy at risk. If your husband finds you—" "He'll find me," I interrupted. "It's not if, it's when. I saw one of his cars drive past this afternoon. They're already searching the area." The fear I expected didn't appear on Ethan's face. Instead, he looked calculating, as if working through a problem that had a solution if he could just find it. "How much time do we have?" "I don't know. A day? Maybe less?" "He has resources I can't compete with." "Then we need a plan." I stared at him. "The plan is for me to leave before he shows up and drags you into something you want no part of." "Maybe I'm already part of it," Ethan said. "Maybe the moment I picked you up on that highway, I made a choice about what kind of person I want to be." "This isn't about being noble," I said, frustration sharpening my voice. "This is about being smart. Dante will hurt anyone who gets between him and what he wants." "You said he wouldn't hurt a child." "I said I have to believe he wouldn't. That's not the same as knowing for certain." Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Here's what I know. You're running from someone who terrifies you, someone who has enough power to make most people look the other way. You came to my door, or my truck, because you had nowhere else to go. And I'm not the kind of person who turns away someone who needs help just because it might be inconvenient or dangerous." "This is more than inconvenient," I said softly. "This is potentially fatal." "Maybe, but I've got a 7-year-old daughter who's watching how her father responds when someone needs him. What kind of lesson am I teaching her if I throw you out to save my own skin?" The simple morality of his position made my throat tight. In Dante's world, survival meant ruthlessness. Compassion was weakness. Helping someone who couldn't help you in return was foolish. But Ethan operated by different rules. Rules that seemed impossibly naive and impossibly brave all at once. "You don't understand what you're offering," I said. Then explain it to me. So I did. I told him about Dante's organization, the legitimate businesses that fronted for illegal operations, the network of people who owed him favors or feared his retribution. I told him about the security detail that followed me everywhere when I was still playing the role of dutiful wife, the driver who reported my movements, the housekeeper who monitored my phone calls. I told him about the night I'd finally decided to leave, how I'd waited until Dante was in a meeting and slipped out through the service entrance wearing clothes I'd stolen from a maid, how I'd walked for hours before the rain started, too afraid to use public transportation or check into a hotel where my credit cards could be tracked. And I told him about the guilt that chased me as surely as Dante's men did. Guilt over the years I'd spent accepting luxury built on suffering, over my willful blindness to the truth I'd half known all along, over the possibility that leaving might make things worse for people caught in the crossfire. Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as I spoke. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You can't go back to him," he said finally. "Whatever happens, that's not an option." "I won't," I promised. "I'd rather die than go back to being that person, living that life." "Then we find another solution." "There is no other solution. You don't negotiate with men like Dante. You don't bargain or compromise or find middle ground. You either submit to their will or you run until they catch you." Ethan's expression turned stubborn. "There's always another option. We just need to think it through." Upstairs, Lucy called out that she was ready for her bedtime story. Ethan glanced at the ceiling, then back at me. "Stay tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps. But for tonight, you're safe here." I wanted to argue, to insist that I leave immediately to spare him and Lucy from what was coming. But the truth was, I had nowhere to go and no resources to get there. And the thought of one more night in this house, where people cared about each other without ulterior motives, was too tempting to resist. "One more night," I agreed. After Ethan went upstairs to read to Lucy, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the muffled sound of his voice through the ceiling. I thought about the life he'd built here, modest but genuine, filled with the kind of love that didn't require grand gestures or expensive gifts. Thought about Lucy, who'd accepted me into her home without suspicion or fear, who'd shared her homework and her stories like I was someone worth including. And I thought about Dante, who by now would have mobilized every resource at his disposal, who would be coordinating search teams and questioning associates and offering rewards for information, who believed, with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been denied, that he would find me and bring me home. He would be furious at my defiance, bewildered by my ingratitude, unable to comprehend why I would abandon the protection and privilege he'd provided. In his mind, he'd given me everything. In reality, he'd given me a cage and called it devotion. When Ethan came back downstairs, he found me still sitting in the dark, my thoughts spiraling. "She wants to know if you'll be here for breakfast," he said, settling onto the couch beside me. "I'll try," I said, knowing it was probably a lie. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that felt companionable rather than awkward. Finally, Ethan spoke. "For what it's worth, I think you're brave. Not cowardly, like you said earlier. It takes courage to walk away from security, even when that security comes at too high a price. Or it takes desperation. Maybe it's both." I turned to look at him, this stranger who'd become an unexpected ally. "Why are you doing this? Really?" He considered the question seriously. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped in a life that's slowly destroying you. My ex-wife, Lucy's mom. She stayed longer than she should have, trying to make things work even when we both knew it was over. When she finally left, I was angry at first. But then I realized she'd done the right thing, even if the timing was awful. Sometimes leaving is the only way to save yourself." "Did you love her?" "Once. Not the way I should have, probably. Not enough to make it work when things got hard. He paused. Do you love your husband? The question I'd been avoiding, even in my own thoughts. I loved who I thought he was. The man I met at that gala, who quoted poetry and took me to art museums and made me feel seen for the first time in my life. But that man was a performance. The real Dante is someone I don't know if I ever truly loved, or if I just loved the idea of being loved by someone that powerful. That's honest, at least. Honesty is all I have left. We talked late into the night, trading pieces of our histories. I learned that Ethan had grown up poor, that he'd worked construction since he was 16, that Lucy's mother had left when their daughter was 3 years old because she couldn't handle the financial stress and constant struggle. He'd raised Lucy alone, working multiple jobs, determined to give her stability even if he couldn't give her wealth. And I told him about my own past, before Dante. The middle-class upbringing, the art history degree I'd never gotten to use, the dreams of working in a museum or gallery that had seemed so important before I'd gotten seduced by a different kind of life. By the time we finally said goodnight, something had shifted between us. Not romance. The situation was too complicated, too dangerous for that. But a recognition of shared humanity, of two people who'd made choices they regretted and were trying to find their way back to something resembling integrity. I fell asleep that night thinking that maybe Ethan was right. Maybe there was another option. Some way forward that didn't involve submission or endless flight. Maybe there was a path I couldn't see yet, obscured by fear and fatigue. I didn't know that by morning, the choice would be taken out of my hands entirely. The sound of engines woke me before dawn. Multiple engines, powerful and synchronized, pulling up outside the house with the precision of a military operation. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, already knowing what I would see when I looked out the window. 5 black SUVs ringed the house, their positioning strategic, blocking all possible exits. Men in dark suits emerged from the vehicles with the practiced efficiency of Dante's security team, taking positions around the property. This wasn't a search. This was a siege. I was pulling on yesterday's borrowed clothes when I heard Ethan's footsteps on the stairs, moving quickly. He appeared in my doorway, his face tense. "There are armed men surrounding the house," he said, his voice deliberately calm. "I'm assuming they're yours?" "His," I corrected, moving to the window. "Not mine. Never mine." Lucy's voice carried from upstairs, sleepy and confused. "Daddy? Why are there so many cars outside?" "Stay in your room, sweetheart," Ethan called back, his tone brooking no argument. To me, he said, "What do you want to do?" What I wanted was to turn back time, to never have accepted that ride, to never have brought this danger to their doorstep. What I wanted was impossible. "I have to go out there," I said. "If I don't, they'll come in. And if they come in, Lucy sees something she shouldn't." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And if you go out there, what happens to you?" "I go home, back to the cage, back to being Valentina Marchetti instead of just Valentina." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry for all of this. You were just trying to help, and I've brought you nothing but trouble." "That's not..." A knock on the front door interrupted him. Not aggressive, not loud, but unmistakably authoritative. The kind of knock that said the person on the other side didn't need to force entry because they knew it would be granted. I descended the stairs slowly, Ethan close behind me. Through the door's frosted glass panel, I could see a familiar silhouette. Not one of the security team. Dante himself had come. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. Ethan's hand covered mine, stopping me. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "Yes, I do. This was always going to be between him and me." I opened the door. Dante stood on the porch, rain-soaked despite the pre-dawn hour, his expensive suit clinging to his frame. His dark hair was disheveled, his usually immaculate appearance unraveling at the edges. But it was his eyes that stopped me, red-rimmed and desperate in a way I'd never seen, the cold control he usually wore like armor completely stripped away. Valentina. My name emerged rough, broken. Not the possessive declaration I'd expected, but something closer to a plea. Dante. His gaze moved past me to Ethan, assessing and dismissing him in a single glance before returning to my face. 3 days. I've been searching for 3 days. Do you have any idea? He stopped, struggling for composure. I thought something had happened to you. Thought someone had taken you, hurt you. I've had every contact I have looking for any sign, any trace. I left, I said simply. I walked out. No one took me. I know that now. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the only visible sign of the rage and fear warring beneath his surface. I found the dress you were wearing, the shoes, the security footage of you walking out through the service entrance like a goddamn fugitive. I am a fugitive from you. The words landed like a physical blow. Dante flinched, then seemed to remember the man standing behind me. Can we talk? Privately? Anything you need to say, you can say here. His jaw tightened. Valentina, please. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Difficult? The word came out sharper than I intended. You think this is me being difficult? You have 5 SUVs surrounding a house where a man and his 7-year-old daughter were kind enough to shelter me. You've brought your security team to intimidate people who did nothing except show basic human decency. And you want to talk to me about difficult? Something flickered across Dante's face. Shame, perhaps, or the closest approximation his pride would allow. I didn't know, he said quietly. I didn't know you were staying with civilians, with a family. Would it have mattered if you did? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Lucy's voice carried from upstairs, higher now with fear. Daddy, what's happening? Ethan turned slightly, called back. It's okay, baby. Stay in your room. Everything's fine. Dante's attention sharpened on Ethan, really seeing him for the first time. You're the one who took her in? Who gave her shelter? I'm the one who found her walking alone in the rain and offered basic human kindness, Ethan replied, his tone level but firm. Something you might not be familiar with. The insult hung in the air between them. I tensed, waiting for Dante's fury, for the cold dismissal or veiled threat that usually greeted anyone who dared challenge him. Instead, he looked at Ethan with something approaching respect. You have no idea who I am, do you? Dante said. I know exactly who you are, Ethan replied. Valentina told me everything. About your business, about what you're capable of, about why she left. And I offered her shelter anyway because it was the right thing to do. The right thing to do, Dante repeated slowly, as if tasting foreign words. And did she tell you what I do to people who interfere with what's mine? She's not a possession. She's my wife. She's a person, Ethan countered, his voice hardening. Who made a choice to leave you? Who walked away from everything you gave her because the cost was too high? And showing up here with armed men, surrounding a house where a child is sleeping, only proves she made the right decision. I'd never heard anyone speak to Dante like this, with directness that bordered on contempt, without fear or calculation. And I'd certainly never seen Dante's response. A slow nod, as if acknowledging a point scored in a debate, rather than an insult to be punished. You're right, Dante said quietly. This was a mistake. The security team, the intimidation, all of it. I was thinking like a man who'd lost his most valuable possession instead of like a husband who'd lost his wife. The admission was so unexpected that I almost didn't process it. Dante never admitted mistakes, never showed weakness, never acknowledged that his approach might be flawed. He turned his full attention back to me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Valentina, please, come home. We can talk about whatever's wrong, whatever I did that made you feel you had to leave, but come home. I can't, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, because nothing has changed. You're still the man who orders deaths without remorse. Still the man who built an empire on other people's suffering. Still the man who thinks love means possession instead of partnership. That's not fair, Dante said, heat creeping into his voice. Everything I did to protect what we built together, to give you a life where you'd never want for anything. I never wanted this life, I shot back. I wanted the man I met at that gala, the one who quoted Neruda and took me to museums and made me believe in something real. But that man was a lie, wasn't he? A performance to get what you wanted. He wasn't a lie. Dante stepped forward, then stopped when Ethan shifted to block him. He was me, the real me, the part I don't show anyone else because I can't afford to. The part I only trusted you to see. Then why did you hide what you really did? Why not tell me from the beginning about the family business? About what being a Marchetti really meant? Because I was afraid, Dante said, the confession clearly costing him. Afraid you'd look at me the way you're looking at me now, like I'm a monster instead of a man. The naked vulnerability in his voice made my chest ache. This was the Dante I'd fallen in love with, the one who existed beneath the armor of power and control. But 3 years of marriage had taught me that glimpses of humanity didn't negate the reality of what he'd become. You're both, I said softly. You're a man who can be tender and thoughtful, who remembers my favorite poems and notices when I've had a bad day. And you're a man who decides other people's lives are expendable when they become inconvenient. Both of those things are true, and I can't live with the second one anymore. Dante's hand rose as if to reach for me, then fell back to his side. What do you want from me, Valentina? Tell me what I need to do to make this right. I want you to be the man you pretended to be, I said, the one who valued human life, the one who believed in justice instead of power. But you can't be that person, can you? Because being that person would mean dismantling everything you've built. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of Lucy's door opening upstairs. Small feet padded to the landing, and I heard her gasp as she took in the scene. Her father blocking the doorway, a stranger on the porch, me standing between them in borrowed clothes. Daddy? Her voice was small, frightened. Is the pretty lady leaving? Ethan's expression softened. Go back to your room, sweetheart. Just for a few more minutes. But Lucy had already seen too much. She descended the stairs slowly, her small hand gripping the railing, her eyes fixed on Dante with the wariness of a child who recognized danger when she saw it. Dante's gaze shifted to her, and I watched something change in his face. He saw what Ethan had seen, a 7-year-old girl, innocent and vulnerable, thrust into a situation no child should witness. And for the first time since he'd appeared on the porch, his certainty seemed to waver. I'm sorry, he said, addressing Lucy directly. I'm sorry for frightening you, for disturbing your morning. This is between your father and me and Valentina, and you shouldn't be caught in the middle of it. Lucy studied him with the serious consideration children give to adults whose motives they're trying to assess. Are you going to hurt my daddy? No, Dante said immediately. I promise you, I'm not going to hurt anyone. Are you going to take the pretty lady away? Dante's eyes found mine, and I saw the question there. What do you want me to say? I knelt down to Lucy's level, painfully aware of both men watching. The man at the door is my husband. We've been apart for a few days, and he's been worried about me. But I need to talk to him alone for a minute, okay? Can you go upstairs with your dad while I do that? Lucy's lower lip trembled. But you'll come back? To say goodbye? I'll come back, I promised, hoping it wasn't a lie. Ethan scooped Lucy into his arms, carrying her back upstairs despite her protests. When we were alone, Dante and I stared at each other across the threshold, the physical distance between us representing a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. That little girl, Dante said quietly. She looks at her father the way you used to look at me. Before you knew. Before everything changed. Before you showed me who you really were. No. Before I failed to be who you needed me to be. He ran a hand through his wet hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. I've been thinking about what you said, about the man who died, about his family, and you're right. I made that decision without considering the cost beyond what it meant for my operations. I didn't think about his wife, his children, the life I was erasing. And now that you have thought about it, now I understand why you left, why you couldn't stay married to someone capable of that kind of calculation. He looked past me, toward the stairs where Ethan had disappeared with Lucy. That man, the one who took you in, he didn't ask what you could give him in return, didn't try to leverage your vulnerability. He just helped because it was the right thing to do. Yes. I've forgotten how to think like that, Dante said. How to make decisions based on what's right instead of what's strategic. I've been playing chess with people's lives for so long that I've forgotten they're not pieces on a board. The admission was more than I'd expected, more than I'd thought him capable of. But admitting a problem wasn't the same as solving it. So what happens now? I asked. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I call off the security team. I leave. And I give you the space you asked for when you walked out 3 days ago. I stared at him, certain I'd misunderstood. You're just going to leave? What choice do I have? You made it clear that forcing you to come home would only prove your point about who I am. His smile was bitter. For once in my life, I'm going to do what's right instead of what I want, even if it kills me. He turned to go, then paused. But Valentina, this isn't over. I'm not giving up on us. I'm just giving you time to decide if there's an us worth fighting for. I watched him walk back to the lead SUV, watched his security team pile into their vehicles, watched the small convoy pull away from the curb and disappear down the quiet street. And I stood in the doorway of someone else's home, borrowed clothes hanging on my frame, wondering if I'd just witnessed the beginning of Dante's redemption or simply another performance designed to get what he wanted. Upstairs, Ethan and Lucy were waiting for answers I didn't have. The house felt unnaturally quiet after the SUVs departed. I stood at the window, half expecting them to circle back, for this reprieve to be another form of manipulation. But the street remained empty, ordinary cars passing occasionally, neighbors emerging for their morning routines oblivious to what had just transpired. Ethan came downstairs alone, his expression carefully neutral. Lucy's watching cartoons. I told her you'd had an argument with your husband and needed some space. Close enough to the truth, I said, moving away from the window. I'm sorry. For all of this. For bringing him here. For putting you and Lucy in that position. You didn't bring him here. He found you on his own. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, studying me. But I need to ask, is he going to be a problem? Is he going to come back with more men, make threats, try to force you to leave? I thought about Dante's face, the genuine remorse I'd seen there mixed with the desperation. I don't know. He's never backed down like that before. Never given me space when I asked for it. I'm not sure if it means he's changed or if it's just a new strategy. What do you want it to mean? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? For Dante to genuinely transform, to become the man I'd thought I was marrying? or for him to reveal himself as unchangeable, making my decision to leave easier. I want it to be real, I admitted. But I don't trust it. 3 years of watching him operate, seeing how he manipulates people into doing what he wants, I can't just accept this at face value. Ethan moved to the kitchen, starting coffee with the mechanical precision of someone performing a familiar ritual. So, what's your plan? Stay here indefinitely? Eventually go back to him? Disappear again? I don't have a plan, I said, following him. I walked out with nothing. No money, no resources, no strategy beyond putting distance between myself and that life. I wasn't thinking long term. I was just trying to survive the immediate moment. He handed me a mug of coffee, our fingers brushing briefly. You can stay as long as you need to, but you should know that Lucy's already getting attached. She asked me this morning if you could stay forever. Be her new mom. The word sent a pang through my chest. I can't do that to her. Let her get attached to someone who's going to leave. Then maybe don't leave. I looked up sharply. Ethan, I'm not saying stay for me, he interrupted. I'm saying stay because you need a safe place to figure out what comes next. Stay because running without a destination is just another form of being lost. He paused. And maybe stay because you've spent 3 years having every decision made for you, and you need time to remember what making your own choices feels like. His words struck deeper than he probably intended. He was right. I'd spent so long being Dante's wife, moving through the life he'd constructed for me, that I'd forgotten how to want things for myself. Forgotten who I was beyond the role I'd been playing. I need to get a phone, I said abruptly. Contact a lawyer. Start the divorce process formally instead of just running away. Ethan nodded. There's a store a few blocks away. We can go after I drop Lucy at school. An hour later, I found myself in a chain electronics store, purchasing a cheap prepaid phone with cash Ethan had lent me. The young clerk didn't even glance twice at me, seeing just another customer rather than Valentina Marchetti, missing wife of a mob boss. The anonymity was intoxicating. Back in Ethan's truck, I stared at the phone in my hands. One call to a divorce attorney would set everything in motion, would make my departure official, legal, final. But something held me back. What if he's serious? I said, voicing the thought that had been circling my mind all morning. What if he really does want to change? Ethan didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was gentle. People can change, but they rarely do. And even if he's sincere right now, in the moment, that doesn't mean he has the capacity to sustain it. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Lucy's mom used to promise she'd do better, that she'd stick around, help more, be the partner I needed, and she'd mean it when she said it. But then things would get hard, and the promises would evaporate. He glanced at me. I'm not saying your situation is the same, but I am saying that recognizing a problem isn't the same as fixing it. I thought about Dante, about the empire he'd built over generations, the expectations and obligations that came with the Marchetti name. Could he really walk away from that? Dismantle the systems he'd inherited and perpetuated? Or would the pull of power and control always be stronger than whatever love he felt for me? My new phone buzzed. An unknown number. My stomach clenched. Only one person would have gotten this number so quickly. The text was simple. I meant what I said. Take all the time you need. I'll be waiting. D. I showed it to Ethan. He read it, his expression unreadable. At least he's consistent. For now. Over the next several days, a strange routine developed. I helped Ethan with household tasks, grateful to have something productive to do with my hands. I walked Lucy to the bus stop in the mornings, her small hand in mine, listening to her chatter about school and friends, and the hamster her class was taking care of. I cooked dinner some nights, simple meals that bore no resemblance to the elaborate productions Dante's chef had created, and found satisfaction in the ordinary domestic rituals I'd been insulated from in my previous life. And every evening, my phone would buzz with a message from Dante. Never demanding, never threatening. Just small updates, as if maintaining a connection I hadn't asked for. Saw the Caravaggio exhibit you wanted to visit. Made me think of you. The rosebush you planted in the garden is blooming. Purple, like you said it would be. I fired Carlotti. The decision I made about the witness, it was his recommendation. I should have questioned it instead of just accepting it. That last message made me pause. Carlotti had been one of Dante's longest-serving advisors, a man whose counsel he'd trusted implicitly. Firing him was more than symbolic. It represented a genuine shift in how Dante made decisions. Or it was an elaborate performance designed to draw me back. He's persistent, Ethan observed one evening, seeing me stare at my phone. He always has been. It's one of the things I loved about him initially. When Dante wants something, he doesn't give up. And right now, he wants you back. Yes. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I ask you something? Do you still love him?" The question I'd been avoiding. I don't know. I love who he was when we first met. I hate what he became, or what I discovered he'd always been. I'm not sure if that adds up to love or just complicated grief. That's honest, at least. Lucy bounded into the room, interrupting the conversation with a request for help with her homework. I settled beside her at the table, walking her through multiplication problems, and tried not to think about the parallel life I might have had if things had been different. Children of my own, homework and soccer games, and ordinary domestic chaos instead of charity galas and security details. That night, after Lucy was in bed, Ethan and I sat on the porch despite the chill in the air. The quiet street stretched before us, so different from the manicured grounds of the Marchetti estate. "I called a lawyer today," I said abruptly. "Started the divorce process." Ethan glanced at me but didn't speak, giving me space to continue. "She said it'll be complicated. Dante has resources I can't match, lawyers who can drag this out indefinitely. She also said I should be prepared for him to refuse to accept the divorce, to fight me on every point." "How did you respond?" I told her to proceed anyway, that I'd spent 3 years in a marriage that was really a prison, and I wasn't going back no matter how hard he made it. "Good for you." I pulled my borrowed jacket tighter around myself. She also asked if I was safe, if I needed protection. I told her I was staying with a friend, that Dante knew where I was but hadn't made any threats. Is that true? About him not making threats? He hasn't explicitly threatened me, but the implicit threat is always there. The reminder of his power, his reach, his ability to find me anywhere I go. Ethan shifted in his chair. "For what it's worth, I don't think he's going to hurt you. Whatever else he is, I got the sense that morning that he genuinely cares about you. Caring and possessing aren't the same thing." "No. But maybe for him they've always been intertwined." We sat in silence, watching the occasional car pass, the lights in neighboring houses blinking out as people settled in for the night. This was peace, I realized. This quiet existence, free from the constant tension of navigating Dante's world, free from wondering what violence was being committed in my name while I played the gracious hostess at dinner parties. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Dante. "I met with the widow, the one whose husband I ordered killed. I didn't tell her who I was, just that I was someone who worked with her husband. I set up a fund for her children's education. It doesn't bring him back. But maybe it helps. Maybe it's a start." I read the message twice, trying to decide if it was genuine or calculated. Dante meeting with the widow, confronting the human cost of his decisions. That wasn't characteristic. He'd always insulated himself from the consequences of his actions, delegating the messy details to subordinates. But it was also exactly the kind of grand gesture he'd make to win me back. knowing I'd been haunted by that family's suffering. "More messages?" Ethan asked. I showed him my phone. He read it, his expression thoughtful. "That's significant, if it's real." "That's the question, isn't it? How do I know what's real and what's performance?" "I guess you watch what he does over time. Patterns matter more than individual actions." Over the following week, the messages continued. Dante had restructured his organization, delegating more authority and creating accountability measures. He'd met with federal prosecutors, offering information about rivals in exchange for immunity for his lower-level employees. He'd started liquidating some of his more questionable business ventures. Each message painted a picture of a man trying to dismantle the empire he'd spent his life building. Each message made me wonder if this transformation was genuine, or simply the most elaborate manipulation he'd ever attempted. And each message made the decision I was facing more complicated. "He's asking to see you," I told Ethan one morning, showing him the latest text. "Says he wants to talk face to face. No security detail, no lawyers, just the two of us." "Are you going to go?" I didn't answer immediately. The thought of seeing Dante again, of being in the same room with him without the barrier of Ethan's presence or the protective distance of text messages, filled me with conflicting emotions. Fear, certainly. Anger at what he'd put me through. But also a traitorous hope that maybe, just maybe, the changes he was describing were real. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to hear what he has to say, wants to look him in the eye and decide if this transformation is genuine. But part of me is terrified that seeing him again will make me weak, that I'll fall back into old patterns because being with him is easier than building a new life from nothing." Ethan leaned against the counter, his expression understanding. "You're not the same person who left him. These past few weeks I've watched you become more yourself. Less afraid, more decisive. Whatever you decide about Dante, you're doing it from a position of strength now, not desperation." His words settled something in me. He was right. I had changed. The woman who'd walked out of the Marchetti estate in a silk blouse and designer heels had been broken, desperate, running from something she couldn't face. The woman I was now had faced it, had survived it, and was building something new from the wreckage. I'll meet with him, I decided. But on my terms. Public place, limited time, clear boundaries. I texted Dante the conditions. A coffee shop in town, 1 hour, tomorrow afternoon. His response was immediate. "I'll be there. Thank you for giving me this chance." That night, I barely slept. Tomorrow I would face the man I'd loved and feared in equal measure. Tomorrow I would decide if the transformation he was claiming was real, or simply another layer of the performance he'd maintained our entire marriage. Tomorrow, everything would change again. I just didn't know yet if it would be for better or worse. The coffee shop was exactly the kind of place Dante would never normally frequent. A local chain with worn furniture and laminate countertops, where the espresso came from a machine rather than a trained barista. I'd chosen it deliberately, placing him in unfamiliar territory where his usual advantages of wealth and intimidation held no power. I arrived early, claiming a table near the window where I could see him approach. Ethan had offered to come with me, to wait in his truck as backup. But I'd declined. This was something I needed to face alone. When Dante appeared, I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the tailored suit and polished appearance I'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he wore jeans and a simple sweater, his hair less carefully styled, his usual veneer of perfection deliberately stripped away. He looked vulnerable in a way I'd never seen, and I wondered if that too was calculated. He spotted me and crossed the room, his movements careful, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. When he reached my table, he didn't sit immediately. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, his voice low. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." He gestured to the empty chair. "May I?" I nodded, and he sat across from me, close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the lines of stress that had deepened around his mouth. He looked like a man carrying an enormous weight, and for the first time since our reunion on Ethan's porch, I felt a flicker of sympathy. "You look different," I observed. "I feel different." He ran a hand through his hair, that gesture of frustration I knew so well. "These past weeks, without you, I've had to confront who I am when I'm not performing the role of Dante Marchetti, and I don't like what I found. Which is a man who forgot that power is supposed to protect people, not control them, who convinced himself that fear was the same as respect, that obedience was the same as love." His eyes met mine, and I saw genuine pain there. A man who drove away the only person who ever made him want to be better. The words were everything I'd wanted to hear during our marriage, the acknowledgement that what we'd had was broken, and that he'd been responsible for the breaking. But hearing them now, after everything, I wasn't sure if they changed anything. "I've been getting your messages," I said, "about the changes you're making, the widow's fund, the restructuring, the meetings with prosecutors. It's real, Valentina. All of it. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. You can verify everything I've told you. And if I do, if I confirm that you're actually dismantling your empire, actually trying to become someone different, what then?" Dante leaned forward, his hands flat on the table between us. "Then maybe you consider giving me another chance. Not to go back to what we were, but to build something new. Something based on who we both are now instead of who we pretended to be." I thought about the past weeks at Ethan's house, the simple life I'd been living. Helping with homework, cooking ordinary meals, existing without the constant weight of Dante's world pressing down on me. I'd been happy there, or at least content in a way I hadn't been in years. "I don't know if I can go back to that life," I said honestly. "Even a reformed version of it. I don't know if I can live surrounded by the reminders of what you were, what you did." "Then don't." His response caught me off guard. "Don't come back to the estate. Don't resume the role of Valentina Marchetti, wife of a crime boss. Be just Valentina, living whatever life you choose, and let me earn my way back into it piece by piece. And your organization, your family legacy, you'd really walk away from all of that?" "I'm not walking away from responsibility. I'm walking away from the parts that made you leave. The violence, the moral compromise, the casual disregard for human life." He paused. "I've set up a legitimate transition plan. The legal parts of the business continue under proper management. The illegal parts are being transferred to federal oversight in exchange for immunity for most of my people. It'll take time, but I'm committed to it." I studied his face, searching for signs of deception. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked dangerously like hope. "Why?" I asked. "Why go through all of this? You could have any woman you wanted. Why chase after one who walked away?" "Because you're the only one who ever saw me as a man, instead of a name or a source of power. The only one who made me want to be worthy of something beyond fear and control." His voice roughened. "Because I love you, Valentina. Not the way I thought I did when we got married. That was possession, ownership, the way I'd been taught to love by men who didn't know better. I love you the way that widow loved her husband, the way that single father loves his daughter. The kind of love that puts the other person first, that wants them to be happy, even if their happiness doesn't include you." The reference to Ethan made me look up sharply. "You know about Ethan? I know he took you in when you had nowhere to go. I know his daughter has gotten attached to you. I know he's a good man who showed you the kind of uncomplicated decency my world forgot existed." Dante's expression was pained but sincere. "And I know that if you decided to stay with him, to build a life there instead of giving me another chance, I would have to accept it. Because that's what loving someone actually means. The admission hung between us, heavy with implications. This was the test I'd been waiting for. Would Dante respect my choice even if it meant losing me permanently? "I'm not staying with Ethan," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Relief flashed across his face, quickly followed by wariness, as if he suspected a trap. "But not because I'm choosing you, because that wouldn't be fair to him or to Lucy. They've been kind to me, but they're not my family. I can't build my future on their charity." "Then what do you want? Tell me, and I'll make it happen." I thought about the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. What did I want? Not what Dante wanted for me, not what would be easiest or safest, but what I genuinely wanted for myself. I want my own place. Small, modest, mine. I want to go back to work, maybe at a gallery or museum like I'd planned before we met. I want to build a life that's separate from yours, where my identity isn't tied to being your wife. Dante nodded slowly. "And us? Is there an us in this future you're imagining?" "I don't know yet. Maybe if you prove that the changes you're making stick. If you show me over time that this transformation is real and not just a strategy to get me back." I met his eyes. "But it would have to be different than before. We'd have to be equals, partners who make decisions together. No more doing whatever you want and expecting me to accept it because you know best." "I can do that," he said immediately. "I want to do that." "Can you, though? Really? You've spent your entire life being the one in control, the one who makes decisions for everyone around you. Can you actually share that power? Can you accept that I might disagree with you, might make choices you don't like, might tell you no, and expect you to respect it?" He was quiet for a long moment, and I appreciated that he was actually considering the question instead of just giving me the answer he thought I wanted to hear. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I want to say yes, want to promise that I can be the partner you need. But the honest answer is, I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of change. All I can promise is that I'll try every day to be better than I was yesterday." The honesty was worth more than easy promises. "Okay," I said. "Then here's what happens. I find my own place, start building my own life. You continue with the changes you're making, dismantling the criminal enterprise, restructuring the legitimate businesses, becoming someone who can exist in the world without leaving a trail of damage. And in 6 months, we reassess. See if the transformation's stuck, if there's still something worth rebuilding between us." 6 months, Dante repeated, as if testing the timeline. "And during that time, we can talk. Have dinner occasionally, if you want. But I'm not coming home. I'm not playing the role of your wife. And I'm not making any promises about the future." He nodded, accepting the terms, even though I could see how much they cost him. "Can I ask one thing?" "What?" "The single father, Ethan. Tell me honestly, is there something between you?" I thought about Ethan, about his kindness and steadiness, the way he'd offered help without expecting anything in return. He's a good man, a friend when I needed one. But no, there's nothing romantic between us. Relief crossed Dante's features again. "Good. I mean, not good that you're not involved with someone, just good that I don't have to compete with someone who's clearly a better man than I am." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "You're not competing with anyone, Dante. You're competing with yourself, with the man you used to be versus the man you're trying to become." We talked for another 20 minutes, working out practical details. Dante would have his lawyers handle the divorce proceedings in a way that was fair to both of us. No fighting over assets, no attempts to leave me destitute if I ultimately decided not to return. He'd help me find an apartment, fronting the deposit and first month's rent as a loan rather than a gift, preserving my independence. He'd respect my boundaries, wouldn't show up unannounced or send his security team to watch me. And the texts? I asked. The daily updates? If you want them to stop. I didn't say that. I hesitated. Maybe just less frequently. Give me space to miss you instead of feeling like you're constantly watching. Something warm flickered in his eyes. You'd miss me? I spent 3 years married to you, Dante. Of course, part of me would miss you. But missing someone and trusting them are different things. We stood to leave, and for a moment, I thought he might try to hug me or kiss me, some physical gesture to bridge the distance between us. Instead, he simply extended his hand, formal and respectful. Thank you for giving me a chance, he said as I shook it. I know I don't deserve it. You don't, I agreed. But maybe we both deserve the opportunity to figure out who we are outside the roles we've been playing. I left the coffee shop and walked to where Ethan waited in his truck, having insisted on picking me up despite my protests. He read my expression as I climbed in. How did it go? Better than expected, worse than I hoped. I buckled my seatbelt, staring out at the ordinary street. He's actually trying to change, or says he is. We agreed to 6 months apart while I build my own life, and he proves the transformation is real. And then we'll see if there's anything left worth saving. Ethan pulled into traffic, navigating the familiar streets back to his house. For what it's worth, I think you handled it well. Took control of the situation instead of letting him dictate terms. I learned from watching you, I said. The way you stood up to him that morning, refused to be intimidated. It reminded me that I could do the same. We drove in comfortable silence until Ethan spoke again. You know you don't have to leave right away, right? You can stay with us while you look for a place. Get settled. I know, and I'm grateful. But Lucy's already too attached. And the longer I stay, the harder it'll be for everyone when I go. He nodded, accepting the truth of it even though I could see he was disappointed. Over the past weeks, we'd developed a friendship that felt genuine and uncomplicated, so different from the careful alliances I'd navigated in Dante's world. But staying would blur lines that needed to remain clear, for his sake, for Lucy's, and for my own. That evening, I helped Lucy with homework one last time, read her a bedtime story, and told her gently that I'd be moving to my own apartment soon. Can I visit? She asked, her eyes wide with worry. Of course you can. Anytime your dad says it's okay. And will you come back sometimes? To have dinner with us? I'd like that very much. After she fell asleep, I found Ethan on the porch, occupying his usual spot. I settled beside him, pulling my jacket tight against the autumn chill. She's going to miss you, he said. I'll miss her too. Both of you. I paused. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. A glimpse of what normal could look like. What life could be without all the complications and compromises. But you're going back to complicated anyway. Maybe. Or maybe I'm going forward to something new that hasn't been defined yet. I looked at him. Either way, I'll always be grateful for what you did, for seeing someone in trouble and helping without asking what you'd get in return. That's what decent people do, not in the world I came from. In that world, everything has a price. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, For what it's worth, I hope things work out with your husband. I hope he really has changed, and that you both find a way back to each other. But if it doesn't work out, if you discover it was all performance, you'll know you have friends who'll help you start over again. The simple promise made my throat tight. Thank you. 3 weeks later, I moved into a small studio apartment on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone. It was modest, a fraction of the space I'd had at the estate, but it was mine. I'd furnished it with pieces from thrift stores and yard sales, creating a space that reflected who I was, rather than who I'd been expected to be. I got a job at a small gallery in the Arts District, using my maiden name and leaving my marriage to Dante Marchetti carefully off my resume. The pay was terrible compared to what I'd been accustomed to, but the work satisfied something in me that had been starved for years. And every Friday evening, Dante and I had dinner together. Sometimes at quiet restaurants, sometimes at the apartment I'd made my own. We talked about his progress, the legal transformations, the accountability measures, the ways he was learning to exist without the armor of power and fear. We talked about my work, the artists I was discovering, the satisfaction of building something that was mine. We didn't talk about the future beyond acknowledging it existed. 6 months came and went. The deadline we'd set passed without ceremony, both of us understanding that transformation didn't happen on a schedule. But one evening, as we sat in my small apartment sharing takeout, Dante looked around at the life I'd built and said, "You're happy here." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I am. Happier than I've been in years, even though you're living in a studio apartment and working a job that barely pays the bills. Especially because of that. Because it's mine. Because I chose it. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. Why you had to leave. Why you couldn't come back to the life we had. You weren't running from me. You were running toward yourself. Yes. He set down his food, his expression serious. I want to be part of this life you're building. Not as the man who provides for you or protects you or makes decisions on your behalf, just as someone who loves you and wants to support whatever you choose to do. I studied him. This man who'd been both my greatest love and my deepest fear. The past 6 months had shown me glimpses of who he could be. Thoughtful, vulnerable, willing to change. But I'd also seen moments where his old instincts surfaced, when control and possession tried to reassert themselves. I'm not ready to be married again, I said honestly. Not to who we were before, maybe not ever. I know. But I'd like you to be part of my life. As a friend, as someone I'm still learning to trust again. And maybe, eventually, as something more. Relief and hope warred across his features. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. We finished dinner, talking about small things. A new artist the gallery was featuring. A restructuring decision Dante was wrestling with. Lucy's upcoming birthday party that I'd been invited to attend. Ordinary conversation between two people learning to exist together outside the roles they'd once played. When he left that night, he kissed my forehead gently, a gesture that held affection without pressure. And I stood in the doorway of my small apartment, watching him walk down the stairs, thinking about futures that hadn't been written yet, and choices that were finally my own to make. I didn't know if Dante and I would find our way back to each other. Didn't know if the transformation he'd begun would last, or if old patterns would eventually reassert themselves. But I knew that whatever happened, I would face it as myself. Not as someone's wife or possession or project, but as Valentina, a woman who'd learned the hard way that the only cage harder to escape than someone else's control was the one you built yourself. And I knew that on a rainy night when I'd had nowhere to turn, a stranger had stopped and offered help, without expecting anything in return. That kindness had saved me in ways Dante's protection never could, had shown me that safety and freedom weren't opposites but partners. The future was uncertain, complicated, full of questions I couldn't answer yet. But it was mine to shape, mine to choose, mine to live. And that, finally, was enough.